History rarely collapses all at once. Most of the time, it rots slowly. A coin disappears here. A judge gets bribed there. A hungry family pays taxes while nobles throw parties behind palace walls, and people endure it. For years, sometimes generations, but every society has a breaking point. A single moment when corruption stops feeling like an inconvenience and starts feeling like humiliation. In ancient Rome, revolutionary France, Imperial China, and countless forgotten kingdoms, the same terrifying pattern appeared again and again. The powerful believed the system would protect them forever. The people believed nothing would ever change. Both sides were wrong, because when corruption grows too visible, too arrogant, history doesn't whisper anymore. It explodes, and one ruler in particular ignored every warning sign until the streets themselves turned against him. But to understand why, we have to go back to where the poison really began. Corruption becomes truly dangerous when leaders stop hiding it. That's when ordinary people begin noticing the gap between the promises they hear and the lives they actually live. In the final years before the French Revolution, peasants starved while royal elites spent fortunes on luxury. Bread prices exploded. Taxes crushed the poor. Meanwhile, the monarchy acted as if nothing was wrong. And this wasn't unique to France. In ancient Rome, senators openly sold political influence. In late dynasties across China, officials demanded bribes just to let citizens survive another season. The system became a machine that rewarded greed at every level. The worst part: corruption spreads psychologically. Once people see the powerful cheating openly, trust evaporates everywhere. Neighbors distrust neighbors. Workers resent rulers. Soldiers question orders. And eventually, one question begins spreading through society like fire. If the system is already broken, why obey it at all? Here's the terrifying part about corruption. Once it infects enough institutions, fixing it peacefully becomes almost impossible. Why? Because everyone benefiting from the system suddenly has something to lose. Judges protect corrupt politicians. Politicians protect wealthy allies. Military leaders protect the government funding them. The entire structure becomes self-defending. That's exactly what happened during the final years of the Roman Republic. Elections became auctions. Loyalty could be purchased. Wealth determined justice. Citizens slowly realized laws no longer applied equally. And when people lose faith in fair systems, they stop using peaceful solutions. They stop voting, stop trusting courts, stop believing reform matters. That's the moment societies enter dangerous territory, not because corruption exists, but because hope disappears. And once hope disappears, anger begins looking more reasonable than patience. Revolutions rarely begin with one enormous event. Most begin with something small that symbolizes something bigger. A tax increase, a stolen election, a police beating, an empty marketplace. In 1789, France, bread shortages became more than hunger. They became proof the monarchy no longer cared. In Russia, before 1917, ordinary citizens watched elites live comfortably, while soldiers died and workers starved. Corruption stopped being abstract. It became personal. And once suffering becomes personal, fear starts collapsing. That's what terrifies governments. Most not angry people, but people who are no longer afraid, because fear is what keeps corrupt systems stable. The second citizens believe they have nothing left to lose, crowds begin forming, protests begin growing, whispers become chants, and then suddenly, the streets belong to the people instead of the rulers. Corrupt governments often survive for decades because people believe resistance is hopeless. But once enough citizens rebel together, something strange happens. Fear changes sides. Suddenly rulers panic. That's exactly what happened during the fall of countless regimes throughout history. Leaders who once looked untouchable began hiding behind guards, fleeing cities, or desperately promising reforms they ignored for years. But by then, trust was already dead. The French monarchy tried compromise too late. The Russian Empire underestimated public rage for too long. Even mighty Rome discovered that corruption could slowly weaken the loyalty holding the entire state together. And here's the brutal truth. History keeps repeating. Corruption doesn't just destroy economies, it destroys legitimacy. Once citizens stop believing rulers deserve power, authority becomes fragile glass. One crack appears, then the entire structure shatters. But overthrowing corruption creates a new problem history rarely warns people about: what comes after the collapse. Because revolutions are emotional, building stable systems is not. After corrupt regimes fell, many societies entered chaos. France descended into executions and political paranoia. Revolutions that began with hope sometimes created new forms of oppression. In some places, the people removed corrupt rulers only to replace them with leaders equally hungry for power. That's the tragedy hidden inside history's biggest uprisings. Destroying a corrupt system is easier than creating a fair one. And yet, despite the danger, people kept rebelling again and again across centuries. Why? Because eventually, Corruption creates conditions so unbearable that even uncertainty feels safer than obedience. Different countries, different centuries, different cultures, yet the pattern keeps repeating with frightening precision. First comes inequality, then visible corruption, then public frustration, then denial from leaders convinced they're untouchable, and finally, explosion. History shows this cycle everywhere, from collapsing empires to modern political scandals. The details change, human behavior doesn't. Corrupt systems often believe control equals stability, but real stability comes from trust. The moment leaders treat power like personal property, they slowly disconnect from reality itself. They stop hearing warnings, stop understanding ordinary life, stop noticing how much resentment is building beneath them. And that's the dangerous illusion corruption creates. The belief that silence means acceptance. But silence is often just pressure building underground. Moments before everything bursts open. So why does corruption keep pushing societies to the edge over and over again? Because corruption is never just about stolen money. It's about stolen dignity. People can survive hardship. They can survive poverty. They can even survive unfairness for surprisingly long periods of time. But what humans struggle to tolerate is the feeling that the rules only exist for ordinary people, while the powerful escape consequences forever. That's the real reason history explodes. Not because citizens suddenly become violent, but because they eventually stop believing peaceful systems still work. And every empire that ignored that warning made the same fatal mistake. They thought power came from fear. But history suggests something else entirely. Power survives only as long as people believe the system deserves to exist. The second corruption destroys that belief. Even the strongest governments can collapse faster than anyone imagined.